We worked with a customer that identified a bottleneck on the production line, and they didn't understand why a certain order type always took 6 days to be scheduled and actually be produced, even though they expected it to be only 2 days. We were able to find out that two different edge conditions were interacting with each other in a way that led to this particular order type always taking 6 days to be scheduled and not the 2 days that they wanted. And that was hidden in some kind of custom code line, some edge condition that no one knew actually had an impact on the other one. And so we were able to figure that out and actually suggest how you could resolve that.
Navigating an SAP transformation? We get it. By day, we work hands-on with people like you across the globe. By night, we share what actually works. Welcome to Transformation Every Day with Alexander Greb and Johannes Languth, where your complex transformation becomes clear, actionable, and achievable.
Welcome back. My name is Alexander Greb. My guest today is JP Haas, founder and CEO of Conduct.AI. JP and his co-founders came out of Palantir and they built something that does one deceptively simple thing. It reads your SAP system's own code and finally tells you the truth about how your business actually runs. What's critical, what's left over, and why that strange rule from years ago is still there. If you ever felt like changing your system means flying blind, this one is for you. JP, welcome to the show. But how was your summer? I guess quite busy because I saw you running around on Sapphire with these training suits, these Adidas suits, and I thought like, oh, these guys are doing a lot of miles.
It's a good description. We've been running at very full pace the last few months, and honestly for the last few years ever since we found it. But the marathon has now turned into a proper sprint, especially since Sapphire, or with the momentum of Sapphire and the announcement of SAP's investment and partnership into Conduct. And ever since it's gotten even more high pace, and we're loving it. But it hasn't been a chill summer. It's been an intense summer.
Definitely. And what's also definitely intense will be this episode because we are recording. We have JP in the house. You are the founder of a very, very, very interesting company, which is Conduct.AI. And I know there are a lot of companies mushrooming at the moment around AI, and everybody has to tries to do anything with AI. But what my opinion separates you from the rest is at the first that absolutely striking use case that you offer, the amount of content that is already in the use case and the game changer that you are positioning. Because we had that in the conversation up front. You can open a lot of doors with what you do. And when you ask me what are these kinds of doors that you see at customers that Conduct may open, is that many, many organizations on the move to S4HANA who are, for example, in ECC, who are in a legacy world, having a legacy architecture which has been grown in the last 20, 25 years, they, in many cases, remember the effort they had with their first implementation, and they are quite afraid of repeating that again. And as such, they choose these kinds of lean conversions and in a direction where they do not really realize any big benefits and are still having a lot of tasks before them to really be able to generate value out of business AI and the stuff and so on. Because to clean this up, to make this kind of unsexy work in the end, you would have another projects which have no clear ROI, because you have just one guy sitting there cleaning up ABAP codes and so on. You are closing this window of inopportunity and opening doors by scaling a lot of those things that consultants had to do themselves with a lot of budget burning through and with less first step advantages. And that's why I said you are so interesting for me. But before we go to this, JP, how did you end up in this industry or in this SAP focus industry? Because your past with Palantir was a little bit different. How the move towards SAP?
Yeah, you're right. It is an interesting and not very traditional SAP background, but I think that has opened many doors for us as well in our mental perspective on how the industry operates and how we can rethink it in many ways. So let me take you back to the founding days. And before that, my two co-founders and I, we all worked at Palantir in different leadership positions across product engineering and go-to-market. And in every big project that we were working on with industrials, with telco companies, with even government entities, SAP systems were always one of the core systems and data stores that we had to connect with in order to build the foundation of what Palantir was then going to do with these companies. And what we observed over and over again was two things. Number one, none of the IT teams that we were working with had a really good idea of what the structure of the SAP system that they were connecting with Palantir even really looked like. They were telling us things like these structures of the data, but also of the logic that connects everything. These are leftovers of the last 20 plus years. You just said it, Alex. And there was this feeling of a lack of control and almost uncertainty and insecurity, frankly, because these systems are so mission critical. But if you don't really understand how everything is connected and how things are set up, then making any change in the system is like open heart surgery, right? There's very, very dangerous implications of it, but in many ways you're flying blind.
Yeah.
And then the second observation was that most of the IT teams that we were engaging with in our projects, they were about to go into these long S/4HANA transformation projects. They were going to take years and keep them busy for years. And in that time, they weren't able to work on actually improving the business capabilities and the business usefulness of these SAP systems. And that actually is very, very harmful for the business, because if you cannot build new features that make the business better, that slows everyone down.
Absolutely.
And that phenomenon is something that you see in IT at large, right? There's always this gap between the business says, I need a new procurement feature, or I want to optimize my production process, but the time to implement that and the time to value is just way too slow. And that is really bad for the companies that are impacted by that. The example that I always go back to, and I really think of that every morning I get up, because that's the driving mission statement of what we want to do. We saw this defense company in Germany that couldn't make more tanks for Ukraine because working on optimizing the production line was not possible to do in a short time frame, because the IT team was busy with an S/4HANA transformation. And that idea, the fact that businesses are slowed down by the fact that IT projects take too long, that is what's ultimately at the core of what's driving us to do great work every day. We want to bring agility back to the companies that we work with by turning IT from, in many ways, a slowing down function into an enabler of the business. And we should also talk about why that's not actually IT's fault, right? And that maybe goes back to your point around opening many doors for them.
Absolutely. And it's quite interesting what you say, because I always have this kind of feeling, why is what we do always so big? Why is it something that people say, okay, I have so much fear before doing that step, so I postpone it and postpone it and postpone it until to a point where there are really some external reasons in many cases that I finally have to do this kind of step, like transforming myself. Shouldn't it be something that I'm enjoying, that I'm looking forward to? Yeah, like for example, when you do your fitness routine and so on, when you're happy, hey, I'm doing now something good for myself, it transforms it, it will bring me forward. Why are we not able to make this kind of transformation a positive experience for everybody? And what kind of tools and what kind of capabilities do we actually need, to enable our customers to feel that way? Because whenever you talk about these kinds of veterans who have done this kind of ECC to S4 transformation, quite often it's like grandfathers talking about the war. They are so shell-shocked because everything it took so long, it was just a big undertaking and so on. And what you say is something where I see the biggest potential of our entire industry, of making not such a big thing about necessary thing, but making something positive out of that.
I really agree with that. I think, and it comes down to you need to bring more of the capabilities of making ongoing changes and quick incremental changes. You need to bring that capability to each of the team members on the IT side. You also need to involve the business much more. I think there's a lot of the reason why these projects are so complex and so monolithic is that there's a huge coordination effort required between the IT side and the business side of the house, right? And I think breaking that down and making everything more transparent and collaborative is a step towards that.
Definitely. So what was your first step into the world of SAP when you said, like, okay, I stop my career at Palantir and do something own? How did you approach that? How did you build up the connections and your network and so on? Because I think to come into, let's say, this kind of new industry, why not having something of a SAP consultant past where you have a network? How did you manage that? Because I think that's quite an interesting point in your.
The first thing we did was we had numerous and endless conversations with people in the industry. Everyone from consultants to customers to SAP themselves to people in non-SAP but equivalent industries, right? The same problem exists in the Salesforce universe, in the Oracle universe. So we really tried to understand the industry and why it works the way it does from every perspective. And this goes back to the point of, I think we had an advantage of not coming directly from the space, but being close enough to it to understand the principles behind it, right?
Yeah.
And that, I think, put us in a position to be able to challenge many of the assumptions that led to the war stories that you were mentioning just earlier, right? And some of these things just don't need to be that way. And I think often it helps to be able to approach it with a fresh pair of eyes.
Definitely. And where do you see yourself, before we go a little bit more into Conduct itself, positioning between, let's say, what SAP does, what other companies does? Because you see quite interesting, a lot of different approaches to, let's say, a similar topic. I definitely do not say the same because tools and the offerings are too different. But you have startups which go the agentic route and so on. Yeah, you have SAP itself with their own tool for consultants who sometimes more, sometimes less, also are in that area. Where did you wrap your head around saying, like, okay, we want to empower the user because you have an LLM approach? How do I make this kind of super user with the kind of unlimited capabilities out of him? What did lead to that kind of decision, to that kind of approach?
We took a very user-centric approach, partly because of our backgrounds working in enterprise software and in the Palantir ecosystem. One of the things that Palantir does well is that they're very, very user and outcome driven, and that always starts with understanding what is the day-to-day of that person whose job I want to make better. What does that actually look like, and what tools do they need in order to work 10x, 100x better? And that's why we also started from just looking at what exactly is the workflow in transformations as well as in ongoing SAP operations. And then we try to come up with a workflow that really meets all of the different personas in the life cycle, in the workflow life cycle where they are. And the way we then approached that was, we think the missing piece was always, can you derive context about how the current system actually works and runs from the reality of the system? Let's make this a bit more concrete. Can we actually read out all of the custom code and the configuration in a way that explains how this particular SAP instance for a company like, random example, BMW, how that differs from the SAP system of Mercedes, right? What is the difference between all of the different plants within BMW, and how does it deviate from the standard? Importantly, we don't compare Mercedes and BMW, right? Everyone's data remains in, of course, their own instance of Conduct, and there's no comparison between those. But the key point is this insight of what makes the BMW system unique. That is not possible today, and the existing SAP tooling also doesn't offer that. It's not based on the specific context of the system that is contained in the custom code and configuration. We started out with this guideline, or the tagline, "The truth is in your code," right? There are also limitations of that, and we should talk about that, but it is the most important starting point in order to unlock all of these other workflows.
Hi there. Quick break for a short message before we go right back to the episode. Enjoying the insights and stories on transformation every day? Want to make sure you never miss an episode packed with practical tips and best practices from the SAP world, featuring conversations with some of the most interesting people in the SAP universe? Then hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform, whether it is Apple, Spotify, or any other you use. And if our podcast brings you value, we would be incredibly grateful if you could leave us a 5-star review and share it with your friends and colleagues. Your support means the world to us. Thanks so much, and happy listening.
I fully agree with that, because although when you look at, and I've seen it in the past, very, very, very commonly, you have some set coding somewhere, you have a modification somewhere, and so on, or some add-on where you deviate from standard, go into the add-on, and quite often nobody can tell you why, or can remember why. They just say, yeah, probably there is a reason because it exists. So the pure existence of something is the reason to clinch on that and to keep on that, and to break this kind of, let's say, circle, open. That has always been one of the biggest challenges. And with the capability you bring into that, and you unlock this kind of knowledge of what is happening there, why do you use it, do you use it at all, and so on. It can bring a lot of transparency, which is missing. And I think, from my background, the lack of transparency in exactly what you meant about this context, which is not even known to the user themselves anymore. Why did anybody do that? Is one of the biggest problems in transformation at all. Because if you do not understand yourself, how can you transform? How can you unlock any strengths? It's just not possible.
I fully agree with you. Let me give you one example that I thought was really, really beautiful. There was some custom code in one of our customers that said something along the lines of, if the truck that is delivering something for your production line is over 2 meters in height, then it needs to go to gate B and not to gate A. Now, if you read that in the custom code, how do you know whether you need to keep that, and whether that exception should remain in place in a cleaned up environment going forward? Because there could be 100 different reasons why you have that exception, right?
Yeah.
It could be because
the gate is too low, something like this. Yeah,
exactly. Or it could be because in the next downstream step of that, you can't deal with a truck that's over 2 meters high. Or it could be because they found out that if you only fill a truck to a certain degree, that actually leads to higher throughput in your production line, and they've optimized the flow of the production line in some way. Now, all of these are the why and the business intent behind that custom code, which ultimately just encapsulates and encodes your operational learnings and your operational identity as a company. And that needs to be figured out, and that needs to be captured in order to accelerate transformations.
So how do you guide users to these kinds of new knowledge? Is it something like you list everything and then you go through this, or how does this kind of logic works? Does it find out that there's something extremely strange? Let's go deeper into that. Or does it go through let's step 1, take step 2, take step 3 approach in that way?
Let's talk a bit about how we approach and how we think about this wider problem of fit gap analyses. We kind of bucket it under that, right? Which is, in order to figure out how the new system should be set up, the best indicator is you need to understand how you're running today and which of these operating steps are actually business critical for you and which of them are not. And most companies today don't have that visibility. And so the way they approach that is by speaking to the end users and mapping out all of the different steps in the applications they're using today in a qualitative way, right? They just have user interviews and then they build up these manual lists and then they go through each of the steps in order to try and figure out what's going on. We do it the other way around. We can generate a list of all of the business capabilities of your system by just reading out the custom code and configuration of the system. And we then give the IT and business teams a list of all of these requirements that they can then work through almost in a checkbox kind of way. And importantly, we then also add additional context to this. Wherever you have documentation, comments in the code, whatever that is, right? But often even that is not enough, because often the 2 meter truck rule is not documented anywhere. It's just in the heads of the business that was requesting it or the consultant that implemented it back in the day. And so whenever we come across these types of situations, we actually ask the user for input, right? We basically flag that something is a bit of an exception and it looks, that it's unclear why that rule exists. And we can then start capturing that knowledge from the user. And that I think is really important, right? Because at that point you're building this living and breathing and ever growing intelligence layer that keeps the knowledge about how and why your system and your company operates the way it does. You keep that in a platform that you always have access to and that doesn't leave the organization. And that's really, really important, we think. So yeah, that's how we approach it. And what we're seeing as a dynamic is that teams are starting to work differently because having that foundation to argue about, right, and to discuss between teams in a much more transparent way, it flips the dynamic. It flips the dynamic from we're flying blind and we need to try and ensure that every capability is captured to I know all of the capabilities are captured. Now let's talk about how we can get better as a company.
One sentence I read about you, I'm not really sure if you were stating it or if it was said about you, so you can comment about this, but I really liked it because I think it describes very well what you are doing is AI operating system for enterprise IT. How should somebody who has not crossed roads with ConductAI already, how should somebody like that who said like, I really need that? And what I heard about this kind of, okay, I learned to understand my system based on the custom code. What are the first steps with ConductAI?
The first steps are thankfully very, very quick. And that's one thing that our customers are always so amazed by and frankly surprised by, because in the past and in the enterprise IT space, just because the stakes are so high, everything used to take a long time. The platform we've built works completely out of the box and is set up in a very rapid and hands-off way. And that means you only have to install a small ABAP program on your SAP system, and the rest happens completely hands-off. We can onboard and give you that level of transparency and insight into how your system operates within 24 hours. And we've done this with some of the biggest Fortune 500 and 100 customers in the world, and it's always worked like that out of the box to their incredible amazement.
And how can somebody who has not yet crossed the roads, how can imagine these kind of steps? Are you looking for organizations who are now, okay, I'm now in the beginning of a big transformation. That's why I need these kind of capabilities now. Or are you also seeing yourself friends with organizations who said like, okay, I have already, or I'm past one of many transformation because I have more a stepped approach. I'm at a plateau right now. And I want to make the next steps because the first thing maybe was just like a platform change or something like this. Where do you see your target?
We work with customers across any SAP lifecycle stage. So before transformations, in transformations, beyond transformations, just in the ongoing operations stage. And let me tell you why. Because you said earlier, AI operating system for enterprise IT, and that's really what we think and are convinced that we are, which is we are the platform that makes IT much more digital, AI enabled, and quicker in everything they do. If you zoom one level out further, what is it that we're really doing and why? We think that there's an amazing opportunity to ensure that the way that the business wants to run and what it needs can be implemented and realized in the software that it runs on in perfect lockstep, right? So whenever the business needs something to be changed about how it runs and how that's implemented in the system, that today takes a long time to actually realize. That's the ongoing state of my procurement needs a new feature. It gets passed to IT. They try to implement it. It takes a bit too long.
Yeah.
And these two things are out of sync. The same thing can be said about a transformation project or a migration project. Now, the IT side needs to change something about the technical landscape. You're changing an ECC system to an S4 system. How that impacts the business can also lead to these two things being out of sync, right? IT and business are not in lockstep anymore. But if you work with Conduct and if you can deliver that operating system for IT that makes sure that everything that can be changed and implemented at pace now, these two things are moving in perfect harmony and at perfect pace.
When you look back at your experience that you already have done in your customer interactions, what are, considering that, the two best stories where your own system surprised you yourself the most with the capabilities it's shown and with the Heureka moments that you generated with that?
I can think of two amazing, more, but I'll give you two. Number one, we worked with a customer that identified a bottleneck on the production line. And they didn't understand why a certain order type always took 6 days to be scheduled and actually be produced, even though they expected it to be only 2 days. We were able to find out that two different edge conditions were interacting with each other in a way that led to this particular order type always taking 6 days to be scheduled and not the 2 days that they wanted. And that was hidden in some kind of custom code line, some edge condition that no one knew actually had an impact on the other one.
Other thing.
And so we were able to figure that out and actually suggest how you could resolve that. And that has, immediate operational impact on the company. The second thing is a company that was working on a performance issue in an SAP system that had been reported by users, and they'd been looking for more than a week into what were the different causes that might be leading to this. And we were able to figure out what exactly was the cause for that performance issue, and again suggest the fix. And within one afternoon, I mean, this is literally on the first day of the pilot working together, is what they threw at the system in order to test its guts. They were able to completely resolve that.
And I really like these stories because to reflect on that, considering the first part where I said, like, you had some interdependencies that nobody knew about, and you found out about this. Those things exist a lot and they are nowhere documented. You just have to rely on people who may have known that, okay, I made something 5 years ago, which could have an effect to that what the other colleague made something 8 years ago. But in most of the cases, nobody is aware of anything. And the knowledge that you are not aware of that is, from my experience, quite common at customers. And this is one of the reasons, for example, why so many transformations get delayed. Because I have, for example, one customer, or I had one when I was at SAP, I remember it quite well. Big German company, they had around 120 ERP systems. And they were completely stuck, like a rabbit before a foxhole, because they said, like, I really need to start. I want to start. But I have the problem when I cut something over there, on the right side, if I cut something off because I change the system, I do something new, I have absolutely no clue if something on the complete other side of my architecture falls down. And this kind of fear was like completely locking any progress in these kinds of initiatives that the customers do. And what for me is the good news about your existence in that way is that you can with possibilities and capabilities like that gave more momentum to so many stuck initiatives because you're giving transparency. And if I add something of a second example, the problem that we always have in the SAP ecosystem is if you look at the why, what, how dimensions that I quite like because it gives you a 360-degree view on problems. The SAP ecosystem is traditionally very strong in the what, because SAP can explain what their software is doing in the standard and can explain it quite well. Concerning the why, it gets a little bit different. But the thing that is more or less the most relevant for many customers in proceeding that way is the why topic. Sorry, it's the how topic. How do I make these kind of steps? And this is also the factor which blocks and stops too many transformations in that way. How is it reacted in the standard way? Because we had no tools yet like Conduct.AI. Okay, people talk more about the what because they have to try with the possibilities that they have to get the car rolling again. Why the problem is in the how. And gaining this kind of knowledge and gain this kind of security, okay, I have now a safe feeling when I go onto my transformation because I have the transparency now. This will lead so many organizations into a position where they can approach this kind of transformation that have been far away from that possibilities until now, definitely.
100%. And we want to bring confidence where there was anxiety before. And that's the feeling that we see often with our users and also up to the CIO level of, I now feel in charge and control again of how my company runs. And that's incredibly powerful for them. I do think it's worth also drilling into again, what are the reasons for that? And we alluded to this earlier that I think, and I want to be very clear on this, I don't think this is the fault of IT nor of consultants, because I think the tough bit about these big transformation projects is, number one, the technical complexity, and number two, the coordination issue between business and IT. Number one, technical complexity. You were talking about this earlier, Alex, right? You said, if I change something on one side of the system, I don't know how it impacts some other side of it, right? And that's because of all the interdependencies that exist in these big code bases and system landscapes. And humans are not made for this. Humans are not made to manually read out what these big code bases and exceptions are doing. There should be technology that helps you to understand technology. Yeah. That's the first step. And then the second step is, even if you can create a technical map of everything, you don't know how that impacts the business end user, because again, you can't read that from the code and the pure technical objects. And in many ways, that is what these transformations are about. It's figuring out, how are these technical objects actually used by the business side of the house in their day-to-day work. And if you don't have that visibility, which comes down to a communication and coordination issue between these different teams, then it's also very, very hard to make these decisions. Do you agree with that? Or what's your take on why there is so much anxiety in this space?
For me, I think it's a complex topic. It's a very psychological and human topic, definitely. It's about the unknown, but I think nobody is really safe from that. If I look into my typical customers and so on, they're experts in their field and they are working in their organizations and their processes and so on. And based on what they know about their process, they have optimized themselves. And this kind of knowledge, of course, how broad this kind of knowledge is 100% casual for what comes out of it in that way. Yeah, because on the one hand, you have that kind of user type who needs this kind of guardrails and so on, who is feeling safe with a UI which is more or less leading him through certain steps and so on. And this is necessary for many activities, of course. Then you have the other kind of user who is much broader and who needs this kind of tools, like this kind of intelligent tools, where he has basically unlimited possibilities. And what you are now getting from, and we are here now in the business AI perspective, is of course helping, in my opinion, more the second type of users. Because you're getting now an unlimited set. You have LLMs within your ERP system, and you can ask him anything or can make the system do basically anything. But the problem is, no, you have to know a lot of things about your business, about your system, and so on, to be enabled to make this kind of decision and to search for new frontiers within your organization, with your architecture and the way you work with that. And this kind of limiting knowledge that we had in the past, where everything was just one way, was strict, or one example where optimization was always a black box and you had to rely on it, or if you do not feel good about it, you couldn't really work with it. So you did it manually again, was, in my opinion, one of the limiting factors why so many things are now slower in the past, because data volume has risen, complexity has risen, but the kind of way to work with that data has remained in many areas scarily the same. Yeah, because these kinds of, let's say, locked doors that we were talking about in the beginning still exist in that way. Coming now, new solution which help you to get this kind of transparency, to get this kind of knowledge, to make some sparring. Then I think something what I prefer to call insight to action is actually possible. And this is also a principle that you, for example, follow very, very closely with Conduct.AI, that it's one thing to get the analysis and like the bad news, which is something that systems or also AI, when I ask AI, like give me something of the biggest problems or the biggest missing things that I have in my system. That's where they excel, in presenting you with bad news. But this is nice, but it does not really help you if you cannot generate any consequences out of this, which is the interaction part, which should be like options, simulations, and so on. And also, if you want to execute this, do not want to then execute it manually, but you want the system to execute this. You want to make the decision and the system then executes the decision. This is something which is, for me, the actual really game changer, because it gives you an absolute maximum in flexibility and resilience into anything that now in this kind of multi-crisis world we are living in approaches us. And that's why I think these kind of capabilities that many AI tools, models, agents, and so on giving us is not the frightening thing that many do out of them. Like, oh, it will cost all our jobs. To be honest, talking about that point, I think every generation has its technology will take away our job moments. The only difference now, and Scott Galloway did a very good thing, a very good statement about this, is the only thing that's now different is that the technology now is having a better marketing budget than it used to be. So the frightening is a little bit more difficult. But in reality, it's giving you wonderful, powerful tools where you still remain in the driver's seat if you are doing it right. And that's what I think it's a good thing about that. And that's why I'm absolutely excited about the possibilities there.
And it all comes down to speed and being able to do things faster with more visibility and with more confidence. The effect of working, but I would argue in probably all of the different fields, is humans now can take decisions with much more visibility. They have more power at their hands, and they can do all of their work and implement it much faster. And that's powerful, especially in times where business model change and having to be able to adapt so rapidly is more crucial than ever before. You said it, Alex, right? I really agree with that.
Absolutely. But when we look into, let's say, the use case itself, let's go down. You have now a customer who is now in the typical position of, okay, I will now move system-wise, new technology, and I really am 100% convinced that I have to clean up, I have to do clean code, I have to enable myself to use much more of the technology benefits than I did in the past. What are the, let's say, life cycle of the Conduct.AI activities within these kinds of initiatives? Where's the best point to start with you? Yeah, is there a best point where you say like, okay, that's the point where you get the most out of it? How should I rep the team or enable the team to use it the best? And where do you see, let's say, an optimum life cycle based on? Yeah, we have to talk about now, yeah, because you are also growing with your capabilities on a daily basis almost. But based on now, how should I use you in a best practice way?
Let's segment this into two scenarios. Number one, the transformation or the S/4HANA migration is currently top of mind. And number two, you're looking at the ongoing run state of just maintaining your systems, implementing new features. And let's start on the migration side. The best possible time is yesterday, and it's when you're setting up a project and you're trying to understand what are all of the capabilities I have in my system when I start to then run the fit gap analysis, and then you move things over. So the sooner you can start working with tools like ours in order to get that visibility, the better it will be. It will shorten the overall project length. It will give everyone more confidence that they know what they even do. Let's make this one step more concrete. The pivotal point in most of the migration projects is the fit gap phase. We spoke about this a bit earlier already, but to repeat this, the guiding principle here is: do I know what my business needs in order to keep on running smoothly and ideally better than before? And that process of capturing all of the requirements from the business users based on what the system today does, that process is really where we start with most of our customers today. And that's something we can automate and accelerate a lot. Today, what this looks like is you have teams of IT and consultants flying around the world and interviewing users and trying to reverse engineer these sets of requirements. We can do this based on the code and reading it out directly from the system and then giving people a checklist. Once that's done, you then take a look at how can we differentiate between what are the features that are really needed and which of them are less critical. So that's the kind of workshop stage and the filtering stage. And then as a next step, where can I move this back into SAP standard without losing any or at least significant business capabilities? So that's the fit to standard side of it. Once you've done that, you have strengthened and completed the template of what do you want your new SAP system in the S4 world to look like. And then it's all about implementing these extensions and making the technical implementations in the template for the new system, and then going into testing all of those, rolling them out, potentially even doing additional template comparisons if you're running a highly complex landscape. And Conduct can help you with each of the steps. This is going back to the idea of we are an operating system and we meet all of the users and personas where they are. We've got tools and workflows for each of these steps, everything based on a complete semantic understanding of the system.
And I think to add something to that and to jump in on that, very important to understand is that you're not working as a separate agent who does some certain weird things, but this is actually a large language model where you interact closely with the system and can dig deeper and can get more context and so on. So you are always in the driver's seat in that position.
Yeah. That's exactly right. And what's very important, the idea of we don't automate and take away decisions from the user. And that is both on the strategic level of do we still need these requirements? And number two, how do I want to implement them? We offer two modes here. Number one, the kind of autopilot mode of we suggest a best implementation conforming with clean core standards and latest technologies. And secondly, we give you however many options also get you to that outcome. And then you as an IT end user, you can actually look through the trade-offs of the different implementation parts and actually then go and decide on one. And once you've done that,
to step again into that, sorry, because I'm a little bit emotional about this, what you say now. These kind of options, Those are the things who were always missing in the past. Because there was always that one way to go. Everybody claimed there is this one way to go. As a customer, you either had to believe it or you had a bad feeling about this, but you could not do anything against that. Yeah, you just could not work with these kind of simulations or options and say like, let me check that if that's actually the best way that my consultant is offering to me or is consulting me. And this is a complete new way of doing things. Yeah, by having not only more options and a higher quality in the execution, but having more trust in the execution. Because this is, in my opinion, one of the biggest topics that I was struggling with in the past. Yeah, always having the customer convinced, even if you say like, isn't this a step too far? Isn't this too much? Is this too risky? No. Now you have the possibilities to check that against other options to learn about, okay, where is my ability and my risk friendliness best pointed out and making as this the best decision. And this is a complete game changer. And I know the word game changer is quite used a lot of this in these days, but this is really giving a completely new spin about how we work with customers in that kind of transformations. And that's what I'm absolutely excited about.
100%. I think this idea of I can now trust everything much more and I can sense check it. And this goes in every direction, right? It's internal IT teams that are also using Conduct for questions such as, could we be using a standard class much more and roll this out to other parts of the system landscape? Where are areas where we can bring more maintainability with that? All of these are questions that are now possible to ask, and it's almost like a scenario analysis and just being able to test more hypotheses at pace than you used to be able to test because in the past everything took so long to even work through these different options.
And I interrupted you in your first scenario. You wanted to go into the second scenario also.
Good memory. So the second scenario is you need to implement a change that the business requires. They need to make a change about how the logistics process runs and how their warehouse operates. And they make a change request to the IT team. The way this would have worked in the past was almost a small fit gap analysis, right? It's you take the requirement, you compare it with how the system runs today and how that's implemented today. You then take a look at what are ways of implementing that feature and giving different options. And then a long manual process would have started in the past. We can take that request today and work through each of these steps of the process all the way to generating new custom code or configuration. Of course, BTP side-by-side extensions, complying with whichever technological standard you're aiming for. And we can basically automate that process end to end. Again, at every step you can intervene, you can enter controls if you want, but we are getting to the place where the business user just prompts what they need and it's being made a reality in your software system at the snap of a finger. And that's the kind of agility that we want to unlock as enterprises keep on evolving, be that in the business model changes, there's M&A activity, or there's a system harmonization or replacement that needs to be done. It doesn't matter in the end. Anything that needs to be changed about the system landscape and how the company runs, it needs to be implemented and enacted super, super fast now. And that's where we're going with this.
But concerning your archetype of users, of course, you have the customer users. You have, of course, a lot of consultants that use your system. I think a very interesting aspect is what I always call the change that we have to do as consultants to consult again or to become consultants again. In the last years, you've seen that kind of move of consultants becoming companions with asking, what do you want? And then implementing it. And it becomes quite apparent when you see like how consultants are benefiting, for example, in their variable pay with making the most revenue and stuff like this and so on. So it's more about a reaction and mode and basically implementing all the bad ideas that somebody had, not really challenging them. Now, of course, based on the challenges that our customers have based on the technology, consultants really have to become consultants again and leave that kind of companionship behind. With what you are showing us, of course, here, with the possibilities and so on, this is consultancy at its utmost. This is really like showing the kind of options that you have, showing the kind of risks and so on, showing the kind of new spots, and then going into that kind of sparring, into that kind of eye-level discussion about, look, you could do this, but from my experience as a consultant, I know this could be the best thing for you because of, and so on. So the value that the consultant have, that an active consultant has, is rising extremely with that new kind of work. What kind of feedback do you get from the consulting? What are your, let's say, demands towards the consultant? But look, listen, we have this kind of technology here now at our hands. Do this and that with that.
I think you're spot on. I think it's going to lead to expertise and more strategic and value-added services gaining in relevance, and everyone having more time for that, right? And I think what we are going to ask, or what would ask our consulting partners to do, is to really double down on that, to, number one, become the best experts at using and leveraging the tools that exist. And number two, thinking about, how do I use the time that this unlocks now in order to provide even more value-added insight and advice to my clients. I think the mindset needs to shift from, it's a good thing that there's a lot of manual work that I can charge for, and this is driving volumes of projects, and the amount of days that I can sell needs to evolve from that to, how do I create as much value in as little time as possible in order to be the partner for these rapidly changing companies now? And if that mindset shift happens, if you use the tools in order to automate all of the work that isn't differentiated, but you do focus on the differentiated work that makes you build more resilient systems and get to the best possible architectures and solutions, then I think there's a very, very bright future for the consulting industry. And for sure, there is a lot of space for expertise and also human judgment in making these trade-offs.
Absolutely. But what I think what will be one major part is that if you are, for example, a consultant in, let's see, the CRM space or in the finance controlling space and so on, you get now all the tools and all the kind of helpers to become something like the Iron Man in the Marvel world, where AI is supporting you with the crazy tasks and so on, is supporting you with the IT-based stuff, like the coding stuff, like the stuff that may in the past be a lot of part of your work, but which was not really business related. So if you are now an FICO consultant, lots of the IT part will be done by your tools in your toolbox based on AI, like ConductAI. You have to become now, again, more and more that kind of business consultant who works with these kinds of tools. Because you have now the tools to make your customer in that kind of discipline that he's working at, if you're working with an IT FI department, for example, to become best in class. So what you should do, of course, now is to tell them, like, a company in your industry with your, let's say, in your area and so on, has these kinds of technical possibilities to be best in class, and I can help you with my tools to get that possible in record time. And I think we are still too far away from that than I like. But examples like what you present here is showing the urgency of us to develop towards that. Because everybody can say, like, AI is maybe risking our jobs. Of course, we have to develop in that way. And we have to develop to tools. And while I use the hammer and I have now a drill, definitely I should waste no time to learn how to use a drill and scale much better.
And the same happened in software engineering, right? Yeah. Look at how software engineers, especially in startups, but also in big enterprises, work today. They're all using the tools available from AI. And importantly, this hasn't reduced the need for very good engineers. Yeah. Quite the opposite. Exactly. You even more so need to know how you're going to implement it, why you're doing it that way, what are best practice architectures and implementations. And I would argue it's more important than before, because you're getting more and more volume being pumped through the system, but you need to be able to discern what's a good way of doing this. And the same applies on the SAP side as well, both from a technical perspective, as well as from a functional perspective, right? Both of these remain highly relevant, but you can do so much more in less time.
Definitely. When you look into the next 6 months, I think 6 months already is a huge space in your industry. What can we expect from ConductAI? What are your plans? What are you working on and are looking forward to release to the world?
Yeah. Let me answer in two different ways.
Okay.
On the SAP side of things, there's a lot of very, very exciting features that we have in the pipeline. We're going to have full public cloud support, for example. We're also moving into the data migration side of things much more. And you're going to see us being that operating system end to end, and that being fully in effect. There's going to be companies that are running end-to-end change cycles and transformation projects by still improving everything, but Conduct has basically done all of the work on the way. The second element is that Conduct was never built as a pure SAP tool and as a pure SAP add-on. It's the same problem, and we said this in the beginning of the conversation, the same problem applies on the Salesforce side, on the Oracle side, in many custom built applications, of course, right? The ones that are completely custom for the enterprises that have built them. We're becoming more and more that layer of understanding the end-to-end business process and how it's implemented in the logic that sits in any of these systems, and being able to manipulate, change, and manage that logic across the whole life cycle. Even today, we're live with Salesforce already. We have lots of other ones that are in beta now as well. Customers are using it that way, right? There's use cases around, we need to change our billing mechanisms, and that impacts code both in Salesforce as well as in SAP, and Conduct can generate the change requests and implementations across both of these systems, making sure that you don't need to coordinate between an SAP and Salesforce team anymore. You don't need to, you don't have all the risk of interfaces not being adjusted properly. So you're going to see much more of that as well.
Perfect. And if you go completely crazy in the glass bowl section, where do you see, or how do you see IT organizations and consultants work in, let's say, 2 years? What's your vision about that?
The vision remains what I said in the beginning. We want to enable businesses that need to make any change about how they operate. We want them to enable to do that at the snap of a finger. You need to change something about how your production line operates and how you're running your logistics. The software that actually realizes that needs to be there half an hour after the business users identified the need for that. That's the vision that Conduct empowers. For IT and consultants, what that means is they are becoming more and more the sparring partner to the business of like ensuring that it's implemented correctly, and that the trade-offs of making these different implementations are being taken care of. Conduct is the place where all of this is implemented and realized, but IT and consultants bring the best practices and bring the governance to make sure that everything works at enterprise scale.
I just wrote the sentence that you said concerning half an hour later after the requirement is set, the solution has to be there. If we have that in 2 years, that would be completely crazy, because I'm absolutely excited about the possibilities that you have in that area if we are going to be that fast. It would be so great, and I'm really looking forward to the possibilities there. When people who are now excited with what they heard want to get in contact with you, first question, where are the events that you are to be met in the next months? What are your plans? What's your flight plan in that area? And how can people follow you best, get in contact with you best, and following your adventures in the world of making transformation actually feasible?
And I just want to double tap on what you said. This is what fires us up every day. We want to create the world where enterprises can move at startup speed. And we think that's going to be so important for the prosperity of the world, really. And we want to empower the companies that I mentioned earlier, from Mercedes to BMW to Ford and Pepsi and every company around the world to innovate at lightning speed. That's what we're here for. If you want to follow the journey, we'd love you to do that. We've got a very active LinkedIn page, Conduct, and we can share the URL out. We've got a Twitter account now called ConductAI. Our website is staying up to date with all the latest, and my personal LinkedIn account also tracks quite closely where I'll be speaking. For example, next week I'll be with global AI leaders in Paris at the RACE Summit, speaking at the CXO event. And in the coming months, we'll be at all of the big SAP conferences, from Tech Ed to Transformation Excellence, to also lots of the CIO meetings in Germany as well, to CIO of the Year, the CIO Summit as part of Bits and Pretzels. So excited to get in touch there, and would love to have conversations one-on-one, and or of course reach out via email as well.
Perfect. Thank you very much. We will put all of the kind of information into the show notes. So you just have to click on that. And thank you very much for being part of the show. Thank you very much for taking your time for this episode. And I'm looking already very forward to the next things that will happen with ConductAI. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex, for bringing so much energy into the transformation space. And it was a pleasure to be on the show.
Absolutely. JP Haas, a transformation every day. Have a great day.